Good evening, campers. A very, very happy Monday to you all. I hope you had a wonderful, wonderful weekend. Team, it's an absolute pleasure to be here on the Professional Human Show. Kindly, proudly supported by Anywhere Auctions, the online auction platform that gives you such a good experience in terms of how much it can just look after the whole process from the auction stream to the bidding to the contracts, you name it, it does it all. It's a fabulous bit of kit and one that I very, very much endorse in terms of how easy it is to use. In fact, I actually call the auction and do the iPad stuff at the same time. There's videos on YouTube and things like that. It's just super easy to use, to be perfectly honest. So really, really appreciate them for their support as always. Team, don't know about you, but I've really not had the best sort of headspace today for some reason. Look, it might have been something to do with the fact that I was stuck in a COVID testing queue for 2 hours first thing this morning. Wouldn't recommend you do that first thing on a Monday morning, by the way, campers. Doesn't really set you up to fly for the week. It really, really doesn't, getting the tickly thing up your nose. Team, how have you been over this weekend? Let me know. Of course, as always, I want to know how you're getting on out of 10, how your weekend was out of 10 as well. I'm hearing some mixed reports from the front line of real estate over the course of the weekend. My experiences with real estate over the weekend, fucking hard, actually, to be perfectly honest. My Saturday especially was damn hard. It was really, really difficult. I'm sorry, you can't be letting some of these crazy good results get in the way of seeing the reality of the situation that's happening on the front line of real estate. And I would say that this is across the country based on what I'm hearing from agents that I'm doing work with in every single state, territory, and across the ditch in New Zealand. Team, the market is on the change, whether you like it or not, but it's not being brought about because there are a lack of buyers all of a sudden, or there's a shortage of, or there's a greater degree of stock coming on. Neither of them. We are simply letting vendors get away with their dreams and aspirations and their delusions, shall we say, when it comes to how much they reckon they can get for their home. I was battling it all day Saturday. And look, it's not like we shouldn't have a degree of ambition with our vendors, but there's a difference. There is a distinct difference between ambition and delusion. And unfortunately, what's happening is because we've been so starved of stock, right, over the course of the last however many months, there is that horrible temptation to just take stuff on, to buy listings in some cases. And it's not good practice, gang, because when stock does become a little bit more consistent and a little bit more frequent, as it is inevitably going to be, then those bad habits are going to be bloody hard to break. So, team, please just be aware that you tread that line very, very carefully. The buyers are now starting to take a stand. It's not like they're not happy to pay money. They're still happy to spend decent money. I just think they're having the piss taken out of them now that little bit too much. And just as a little side note to this, by the way, and this is predominantly a Victorian point that I want to make here. So please forgive me everywhere else just for a second. But Victorian agents, there are some of you that are underquoting that blatantly now. It's like getting beyond obvious. It's just completely taking the piss. And look, you know what? At the end of the day, when it comes to pricing property for auction, you do need to be a bit conservative because you want to try and get as much and attract as much of that buyer pool as possible to give, to make sure we get true transparency of the market, etc., etc. But at the same time, there's a difference between that and just completely taking the piss out of the buyer population and the greater community in terms of who we look after as a whole. Like, this is the thing, right? You know, some people say it's not underquoting, it's, you know, we're getting the result. You can find results to make the numbers look like anything, right? You really can. But at the same time, you've got to show a better degree of care, a better duty of care, to not bring the game into disrepute, which is what some agents and agencies in Melbourne are just completely not giving a shit about, right? And then they'll go broadcasting how they got 400 grand over the reserve, or 500 grand over there was 200, 300 grand over the reserve, right? It's bullshit. I'm sorry, gang. You can get some that just go bananas, and I accept that. But it's not happening half as much as what we're making it out. And the big problem is, you think that you're King Dick because you're getting an amazing result for that auction. Just think about the amount that you're affecting your brand in the longer term. Too much short-term thinking going on, my friends, in the real estate space, particularly around that pricing thing, because these buyers have got fucking long memories. They won't forget of the time that you completely took the piss out of them. Don't forget that, team, all right? Fine line between ambition and delusion. Fine line between being conservative and completely taking a piss. Don't fucking step over the line, all right? Anyway, on to the topic of conversation I want to talk about tonight, gang. And look, it's gonna start off in a bit of a sporty kind of way. But don't worry, if you're not into sport, if you're not into boxing, if you hate boxing, if you think it's vulgar because it's a very, you know, considered a very violent sport, okay, then bear with me, all right? Because it's not the boxing that I want to focus on, okay? So the topic of conversation that I want to talk about is the lineal WBC heavyweight champion of the world in boxing, that is Tyson Fury. Now, just bear with me while I put a bit of context on it if you're not into sport, right? We'll get into the serious stuff in a second. Tyson Fury just took part in what was potentially one of the greatest heavyweight championship fights there has been in living memory. Okay, it's definitely the one. It's definitely, for me, it's probably the best in this era of boxing. I'm a boxing fan, all right, but I'll try not to get too geeky about it. Now, Tyson Fury, that was the third fight in a trilogy with Deontay Wilder, who is being labeled as one of the biggest hard-hitting punchers, one-hit punchers there has ever been in the sport. Tyson Fury, who is British, has gone over to America 3 times. The first time having come back from a big story, which I want to talk about in more detail, and drew. And then he successfully hammered Deontay Wilder the remaining 2 times. Now, in this third fight, not only did he knock Deontay Wilder out, he was actually knocked down twice himself before getting up and winning the contest. Okay. Now, I don't know if you've seen Deontay Wilder in any way, shape. I don't know if you know who he is, but let me just pull up a picture as to a couple of sides of Deontay Wilder. All right, let me just pull a picture up just quickly. So this is Deontay Wilder, right? He's 6'9". He's a big boy. Okay, he's a big boy, gotta say. But on the left is one of the stories that I want to talk about, where he is in excess of 400 pounds. All right, that's well over 200 kilos, I think. And then on the right, it's when he made his comeback from being as down and out as he was in the picture on the left-hand side. Now, a couple of things that I really want to dig into about Tyson Fury that I think we all need to pay attention to, and we can learn as a really strong lesson in terms of how we conduct ourselves in our lives, in our businesses moving forward. Now, is he the perfect son? Of course he isn't. But there's a few things that Tyson Fury does do that I feel is tremendous. It's something that we have to pay attention to, whether you like sport, whether you like or hate boxing, don't agree with it, whatever, or not. If you are a human, you need to pay attention to some of the stuff that we can learn from the journey of Tyson Fury. Okay. Now, the first one that I really want to dig into is the obvious one, which is the mental health journey that Tyson Fury's been on. Now, in 2015, Tyson Fury went to Germany into the backyard of the person, the man who was at that time the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world in Vladimir Klitschko. Okay, the younger of two Klitschko brothers. Tyson Fury went into his backyard in 2015 for a mandatory challenge of those titles and won on points in their backyard. Now, again, just a little bit of boxing terminology for you here. To win away from home in the opponent's backyard on points is nigh on impossible. Tyson Fury did exactly that. G'day, Lisa. Good evening, Lisa. I hope you're going well. Thanks for tuning in. Now, Tyson Fury did that in 2015. Once he reached the pinnacle, and a lot of us can really relate to this bit of the story. Once he reached the pinnacle of his sport, he all of a sudden felt very empty, very lonely, very lost. Okay, very, very lost. And as a result of that, went downhill in a ridiculous way. Bearing in mind that the world was his oyster, right? He could have done anything he wanted to do in his sport and beyond, to be perfectly honest. When you're the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, you can write your own ticket doing whatever it is you want. Tyson Fury, though, went into such a dark hole where he became addicted to alcohol, drugs in order to try and fill this void because he had nothing that he felt he needed to achieve anymore. He ballooned out to over 400 pounds. And that was just through pure abuse of his body. Okay. He got stripped of his titles on the way down. He got banned from the sport for a doping test because it was through, I think it was through cocaine. And he, by his own admission, and I would beg of you, if you have any sort of mental health challenges going on right now, I beg of you to do a YouTube and YouTube Tyson Fury fight with depression or battle with depression or Tyson Fury depression in the search thing. He articulates his journey through his mental health challenges, his confrontations with those suicidal thoughts that some of us have had. And look, I'll hold my hand up. I've faced my own mortality on one or two occasions in the past. The way that he articulates it, though, is not of a human that you would perceive to be the heavyweight boxing champion of the world, right? So 2015, 16, 17, he was off the map, off the radar completely. Going from being the most famous boxer in the world, being the heavyweight champion of the world, to being a nobody, to being 400 pounds, right? And just losing your identity completely as a human being. In end of 2017, 2018, his life started to turn around, partly through his discovery, or his reconnection, shall we say, with his faith, God, but also a reconnection with his roots, with his DNA, with who he is. As a result of that, fast forward to 2018, 2019, he was in a position where he challenged the WBC. So there's 4 titles, won't go into all that shit. Very boring, very political. But he challenged Deontay Wilder in 2018 to a fight to see who is the better man. He goes into the ring, into his backyard, and challenged him to his face. Having come from nowhere, having done no fighting in 3 years. He has a couple of little warm-up fights and then takes on Deontay Wilder in his backyard for the WBC Heavyweight Championship of the world. During that fight, and you must be under a rock to have not seen this, during that fight, in the 11th round, Tyson Fury gets knocked spark out. Now, normally a referee calls it off, but for some reason, the referee did a 10 count. Through and what he calls divine intervention, you see him go from being absolute horizontal to just getting up, like odd, almost weirdly, like almost robotically, and then goes on to pretty much win the fight. And to a lot of people, he won that first fight. How on earth does someone come from getting to the depths that he got to, rediscovering himself, and then going on to go back to being the best in the world at what he does? I don't care who you are, that's fucking inspirational. That is so inspirational. And it wouldn't matter, right? If it was boxing, if it was tiddlywinks, if it was bloody sewing, if it was music, and I'm sure there's a lot of musicians that would have similar stories to this, right? Or anybody in the arts. But for Tyson Fury to do it and be so open in how he went about doing it and how he got through it and what he went through anyway is just off the charts inspirational. And it's a real shame, right, that for some reason I had this conversation with someone. When did I have it? The other day, I think. And it's sad. It was actually at the PM Revive conference that I had the pleasure and fortune and super grateful on behalf of Nina Sutton. Thank you so much for giving us her platform in PM Revive to just have a bit of a conversation around some of this stuff, right? And it is a shame that so much of the time we have to meet ultimate despair in order to really have those breakthrough moments. And I've not been able to work out how we can have those things without going through some sort of trauma, right? It's shit. But for some reason, I haven't cracked the code yet. And if anybody has, let me know. But the way that he goes about it is it's just mad. It's just absolutely mad. So please, that is the first thing that I would highly recommend you have a look at in terms of going through mental health challenges. He is someone you have to read up on and watch up on. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. Tyson Fury is one sportsman or woman, sports person, who you could say, I reckon you could probably count on, say, 2 hands the amount of sports people or people in the public eye that are undeniably, unequivocally understanding of their own DNA. Right? We talk about things like fear of judgment, being in front of the camera, putting our opinions out there, right? Those sorts of things. They tend to be some of the things that, or mostly, they tend to be the things that hold us back. Fear of judgment probably being the biggest one, especially in the real estate space, right? But just generally speaking, this is a guy who has probably one of the biggest dad bods known to man, but has such an understanding of his own DNA. He comes from a gypsy culture, right? So he comes from the traveling, so from the travelers, right? Settlers, gypsy culture. They're a fighting culture. They have, they have some questionable things that they have around their belief system, but they are very straight up and down in terms of their the way that they conduct themselves with each other and other gentlemen and all that sort of stuff. They really interestingly have a bizarre respect for other cultures and beliefs and so on and so forth. Because I mean, they've been persecuted a hell of a lot themselves, right? But the way that Tyson owns his DNA and puts it through everything that he does is something to behold. I'm going to study this guy for a little while, right? Because aside from the sport thing, take all of the sport out of it, the way that he portrays his own DNA is almost unlike anything else I've seen, almost since like a Muhammad Ali, right? Or if we're to come out of the sports world, it would be someone like, now I'm not comparing Tyson Fury to a Nelson Mandela or a Mother Teresa, but when we're talking about understanding one's own DNA, these are the kind of people that really create these sorts of groundswells of public opinion and things like that in whichever format or forum they're in, right? Don't worry, I'm not comparing Tyson Fury to like a Mahatma Gandhi or something. But when you think about it, the the strongest people, the biggest names, the most successful people in whatever field they choose to be in, always end up being the ones that get this true understanding of one's own DNA. Fascinating shit. Really fascinating shit. Now, hilariously, we talk about things like authenticity, right? So this is what I'm referring to. But the problem is corporate society has turned authenticity into a skill as opposed to a trait. They've turned it into a skill that is manufactured as opposed to a trait that is just intrinsic in who we are. Which is probably one of the biggest dramas as to why people keep fucking it up, to be perfectly honest. So when when we're relating it to our business lives and so on and so forth, we have to, if you really want to be, and look, you define success as to what you want, right? You don't have to be the biggest star in the world, right? You can just be the most successful person within your own world, right? That's success in itself. But you still need to understand who you are. I mean, look, for me, being perfectly honest, one of the reasons why I'm back doing this live show is because it is helping me build my muscle that is understanding my own true DNA and owning that shit, right? That's why I've become a bit more sweary, because anybody that knows me outside of a camera or whatnot knows that I swear a lot. Not because I feel I need to or whatever, it's just because it's part of my vernacular. Right? That's why Billy Connolly is one of my favorite all-time comedians, because he knows all the long words as well. He just chooses to use the swear words. So do I. But look, gang, this is what I'm talking about. This is the unlock that the majority of professionals, particularly in real estate, are trying to find right now. It's the unlock to your own DNA. Is it that fear of judgment piece? Because Tyson Fury doesn't give a fuck, right? He wins the titles, or he retains his titles, and then he starts singing "Sweet Home Alabama" or "Bye Bye Miss American Pie" in the middle of the ring, having just defended or become the world heavyweight boxing champion. He starts singing "Bye Bye Miss American Pie." Like, seriously. If that is not the definition of being true to who he is at all times, I have not got a fucking clue what is. He is just simply a phenomenal example, and a very obvious example, right? Because I know that you could dig into other people. I mean, fuck, you could call fucking Hitler one of these, right? To be honest. But because that's essentially where extremism can be born, right? When you have that deep an understanding of your own DNA, that you sort of go into your own world almost, you become fanatical around your belief systems and so on and so forth. That can go toxic real fast if you're not careful. But if you're gonna be true to who you are, owning who you are and all of your actions at all times, you can do a lot worse than studying up on Tyson Fury. The guy's just, and you know what? He probably says that he knows he is, but I don't think he genuinely understands the example that he is setting. When you go past the bravado. Like, I don't know whether it's because I don't think it's because he's stupid, because I don't think he's stupid at all. Is it because the way he was brought up, that gypsy pride culture thing, whether they were just born to not give a shit? Possibly. Whether he just had it beaten out of him, maybe. Whether he got humiliated as a kid, because the gypsy, the travelers, they do punch on quite a lot in the public domain to settle disputes. So maybe he had the shit kicked out of him. I don't know. Something, or whether he's just being protected from it, or whether he's got that inner circle, inner sanctum around him that just means it all just bounces off him like Teflon. But there is something within his DNA that the vast majority of the world is trying to find, and he's got it. And the reason why I want to bring him up, as opposed to anybody else that could be more culturally acceptable, or intellectually more, what's the word, associated with this sort of topic of conversation, but he is just the most obvious example, and he's the most colourful example in recent memory, in amongst a sea of same bullshit Lambo driving. And I'm not talking materialistic thing, I'm talking about personality. You look at, I'm not a hip hop aficionado by any stretch of the imagination, but you look at almost any genre of music right now, and they're almost sounding exactly the fucking same now. So in amongst all of this sea of monotony, of same stuff, because that's the generic formula that's going to make you shitloads of money, and good on them, right? Because that's the way they're driven. There are just the odd one or two voices that are just above all that. And I genuinely believe in world society, not just sport, Tyson Fury is one of them. Fascinating human being. And look, if you've got any ambition whatsoever of advancing the evolutionary process in terms of who you are, how you go about your game, your business, your life, if you want to go any closer to being who you are, your true authentic self, i.e. understanding your DNA, I recommend that you just put the sports thing to one side, and just study the man, just study the human that is Tyson Fury, because his story is a fucking fascinating one. It really is. Please go forth, have a bit of an understanding, get a bit of an understanding of him. If you are going through any mental health challenges, I'll just repeat what I said earlier. Just go to YouTube and type in Tyson Fury, Tyson Fury, Fury, and then type in depression after his name. You'll find some very strong, very emotionally invoking conversations that he has with a few different people. His podcast with Joe Rogan is a really good one around that. That one is actually a phenomenal one around that. So I'd highly encourage you get onto the Joe Rogan podcast and search Joe Rogan Tyson Fury, because that one's a really fascinating one. They do talk about sport and fighting and all that sort of, but when the section that they talk about mental health and whatnot is just incredible. It really is. And please don't allow your ego to get in the way of your own progression around this. Because some people go, nah, Andy, you're talking fucking shit. I'm not into sport. Boxing's vulgar. He's just a dickhead sportsman. Blah, 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 blah. That is your ego getting in the way of your progression. That is your own ignorant filter getting in the way of you understanding human beings for who they are instead of what they are. Fuck, I sounded daft. Clever then. Anyway, I'll say it again. If you judge what he is before you start to dig into who he is and understanding the lessons that you can take from that, Your ego, your ignorant filter will just judge what he is as opposed to who he is. I'll admit, for a fair while, I used to judge what he was, sorry, because of him being a gypsy. And my bad experiences in the past, like when I was really young, with in my local village at one stage, but also through my parents being police officers and having several challenges with them at various points. But once I actually worked in the hospitality game with a hell of a lot of the travelers community at a resort on a few occasions, and seeing the best and the worst of them at that point, and then starting to really dig more into the Tyson Fury story, especially post 2015 when the walls came down and the bravado just filtered away, and he realized that he wasn't who he was intrinsically anymore. He wasn't acting like who he was. He was just acting because of what he was. It's a fascinating tale. I highly encourage you get into, because there's some serious unlocks in there for anybody that wants to get ahead in their lives or their businesses or both. Simple as. You just got to take the time. Even if you just watch the Joe Rogan, but like, I'd encourage you watch it as well, because you can watch big sections of it on YouTube. I'd encourage you watch it if you can. Fascinating shit. Anyway, gang, I'm gonna love you and leave you. I know it doesn't sound very real estatey, but pretty much one of the biggest questions that I'm copping every single day right now, and it is every single day, is how can I be successful? How can I make my brand more authentic? Questions of that sort of ilk nature. This is it, gang. It's got fuck all to do with real estate. It's got everything to do with who we are in our DNA and how we then look to apply said DNA to our game, to our business, to our careers. Can't go the other way around. Just doesn't work like that. It's a very quick way to a hiding, mentally speaking, spiritually speaking, emotionally speaking. All right. Love you all. Hope this one was a okay one. I'm really happy that I got to talk about this one tonight, because I had a shitty start to the day and I wasn't in the best mood. So I'm really glad that I've managed to end it on a good note, in my humble opinion. If no one else watches this, it's made me feel better about shit. So hopefully it helps one or two of you as well. Gang, I will see you on Wednesday. The interviews part of this series is on its way. It's in process. It's in motion. If there is anybody that you feel would be an amazing interview for the Professional Human series, hit me up on a DM. I'm looking for people that are going to bring genuine human value to the show. All right. So don't be a two bob, like, because I had this in one of my previous series, right, where I had a couple of agents that reached out to me, which is amazing, and I really appreciated it. But then once I started asking a couple of questions, all they wanted to do was tell everybody how good they were and how they just got an amazing result at 123 Smith Street, and thought that that's what this platform was for. You really didn't watch any of my shit, did you? So if you're someone that can bring genuine human value to a professional game, I want to either hear from you, or I want you to tell me who you feel should be on this show. All right, gang, stay safe, stay healthy. Most importantly, though, stay happy. Take it easy, team.